crank the whip. Let's go.
Thank you. Okay. We are live. Today is Friday, April 3rd, 2026. This is Senate Institutions, and we have one item on the agenda, which is H 294, an act relating to telecommunication services and wages in correctional facilities. And so we're going to hear from the sponsor and Legislative Council and Department of Corrections. So you all know us, so I think we will dismiss with the introductions and start with Representative Connor Casey, who is the sponsor. And so you will let us know what you are thinking about and what your goals are on this. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, sure. Great to see everybody. Apologize for being at home. We got a bit of a plague upstairs in corrections, so didn't want to infect the whole Senate as well. And unlike John, I didn't even dress up, so I feel extra bad here. We'll take you through the bill a wee bit here. I'm not the sponsor. I was the reporter on the floor.
Okay.
So to give you the evolution of it, I think it's a bill that started with pretty big dreams there, as far as making telecommunications free and sort of raising the wages of the inmates for the work they do there. We sort of got hit with the wall of reality, though, and realized we needed a lot more information before we could make an intelligent decision. So that really was the evolution of the bill in its current state, which is just a couple study committees, really. So the bill looks at two issues there. It looks at, number one, telecommunications, and number two, wages. It's why does this approach matter? Currently, incarcerated workers in Vermont earn between 25 cents and $1.25 an hour. Phone calls are about 3 cents a minute, and video calls are about 16 cents a minute. Messages like text, 25 cents a minute. So like even a modest use of this can really add up there. And for telecom, we learned quite a bit about it and spoke to some other states. And so there's some real evidence that if you can increase the number of phone calls people are making, this really improves outcomes for like families. And there was some compelling data as far as reducing recidivism too and better reentry success. Letting folks have more phone calls, whether those would be completely free or not, I think would be up to a study. The states who have moved to sort of free phone calls, Massachusetts being the big one, they obviously saw substantial upfront costs in doing this and operational changes, but they found that over time that sort of evened out there. So on wages, similarly, we looked at there might be some ethical concerns about this and policy concerns about current compensation levels. But we also had questions about the budget impacts, if the changes are made there. So that's kind of like the tension that the bill sits with all this stuff. Section 1, I don't know how much you want me to go into this. I think John will give you the run through. Just the intent, supporting rehabilitation by maintaining personal and family connections. One thing that I think really resonated with me, guys, is, when we looked at who was actually paying for phone calls and paying for commissary, it's not really the inmate. It's like 82% the inmate's family, who's often low income. These families often go into great debt while a family member's in prison. So, even though we look at like sort of the justice component of people being in there, in addition to rehabilitation, it takes a real toll on the people they're leaving behind when they go to prison. And just wanted to put that. In the intent, we want to reduce barriers, move away from reliance on for-profit correctional systems. I think we do in every area in corrections, and ensure that future policy decisions are really grounded in data there. So the telecommunications study, it'll be that's section 2, full description of the current system, contracts, usage costs, an analysis of alternative models, and that's where we'd probably look at other states. We also had a couple of companies in who provide, like nonprofit companies who provide these services. That was really informative. So we'd like to dive into that deeper, but we'd also like to get a sense of what the startup costs look like, what the ongoing operational costs are, and what the budget impacts are. So, and an assessment of benefits like, safety and facility operations and maintaining support systems. I represented correctional officers for like 9 years. I was a union rep. So I really like one thing I learned was just like management inside the walls of a prison. It's so helpful to have as many tools as possible. And one tool could be somebody who might be in an escalated state, having that phone call with like a loved one to calm them down or something. So that's valuable for the employees inside too. The incarcerated wage study, pretty simple. What are they currently being paid? What types of work are being performed? I believe it's mostly like kitchen or custodial at this point. Could that be expanded? And just for comparison, what would that look like if you ever if you ever had like contractors or state employees do that? So that's kind of the overview. Again, really ambitious bill to start, really scaled down, a couple of studies, but studies we should have, I think, occasionally just to see where we're at there and if we can do better. So that's it, folks.
All right, well, don't go anywhere yet. Senator Ingalls has a comment or a question.
Thank you, Representative, for the walkthrough. So you started out with an ambitious bill and it crashed and burned. Why don't you just kill the bill? Instead of going into where we already have these people that are they can't even get done with the work that they need to get done. Why don't you just kill the bill and just do the studies within the committees of itself?
Yeah, we saw real benefits, especially in the telecommunications, as far as having like a connection with the family. And maybe that connection isn't free, Senator, but maybe it's a reduced cost, or maybe it's more than a couple free phone calls a month, to keep connections with like your children. So when you get out of prison, you have a deeper, more meaningful connection. And the recidivism rates that we saw weren't nothing. It was like about 15%, I think, from people who have that regular mode of communications. So as far as a rehabilitation component, we saw real value in that as well.
Right, and so many of our the folks who are incarcerated have already been incarcerated, and we could reduce our costs if we had fewer people in the prisons, and we call them correctional facilities, but the correctional part is lacking, in my opinion. So I just have a couple questions. This looks like a very thorough study, or it would be a thorough study. And I don't know if Senator Ingalls, if you're concerned about the corrections department actually doing the study, but we can talk to their representative later today who will be here. But I would very much appreciate this information. So I thank you for your work, and things do take a long time because that's we're dealing with big systems, and I think this is helpful. So any other questions for Connor? And Connor, you can stay, or Representative Casey, you can stay as long as you want.
All right, I actually may skedaddle if you don't mind there and take some more.
It's fine.
But
It's fine.
but it's great to see everybody.
Okay.
The last piece that I didn't mention was probably need a special focus on the folks down in Mississippi too, because obviously they're 1,000 miles away from their families, and we just wanted to make sure whatever Core Civic's doing is consistent with what we're doing in state as well.
Oh, right. That makes sense. Okay.
Thanks very much, folks. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Feel better. You too. Okay. Counselor Gray. Would you
Hello?
take us through the bill?
Sure. So John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel. Again, I'm sorry I'm home too. I actually was in this morning, but do not feel especially fit to be in. Rep Casey actually left me with very little to describe because he basically did walk through the whole of the bill, but I will screen share and walk through the text just so that you can see, as he described, this is two sets of reports. They're not through legislative staff, right? This is just with DOC. And to the points that were just being made, and I'm sure you're going to hear from DOC later this afternoon, but I did want to point out that they were in the room while these discussions were happening. And I think there was back and forth just to ensure that this was within the capacities of their department, but I'm sure that they can speak to that themselves. So let me screen share real quick. Can you see this all right?
Yeah.
Is it small or
It's good. It's fine.
Okay. So H294, an act relating to telecommunication services and wages in correctional facilities. It starts off with an intent section, and this gets at some of the last point I think that the chair was raising about correctional being the word that's used here. So this bill is expressive of a particular intent for how correctional facilities should function. And as you see here, it is the intent of the General Assembly to create conditions of incarceration that encourage the development and maintenance of the personal supports necessary for rehabilitation, mitigate the disruptions to family and community connections caused by incarceration by reducing communications barriers, divest the state from the for-profit prison industry, and inform state correctional policy decision-making with data, fiscal analysis, and agency expertise. Section 2 is the evaluation of telecommunication services, and in particular, this is trying to look at if there's the option of providing a no cost to inmates or their families model of telecommunication services. So both of the reports that you're going to see in this are due the end of this year, December 1, excuse me. So on or before December 1, 2026, DOC shall provide to the House Committee on Corrections and Institutions and the Senate Committee on Institutions a written report evaluating options for providing those no-cost telecommunications services to inmates in the department's custody. And then there's a set of enumerated items that DOC needs to look to. So the first of these in subdivision 1, to have a point of comparison, you need to know what the existing model is. And so that's what's in subdivision 1. Describe the current telecommunications service model, including usage rates, cost, and contract terms under existing provider arrangements. The call out to usage rates, probably fairly intuitive, but as you'll see later on, part of what would be identified as a cost of switching to a no-cost model for inmates is that you might expect an uptick in usage rates right at the point that you don't have to pay for those pieces. So that's part of the evaluation that you're going to see here. But first, establishing the baseline. What is the current model? On page 2, describe alternative options for providing telecommunication services, including through nonprofit providers or as a regulated public utility. I would call out that the first of these through nonprofit providers was more substantively explored in the House Corrections Committee. We didn't get so much into usage of as a regulated public utility. It was sort of an idea that was floated that might be useful, but I could expect that turning into something larger if that's what comes back. So I just wanted to flag that the nonprofit piece was explored in more depth in committee. 3, analyze the cost to the state of each alternative, including 1, what are your startup costs? And in particular, you see this second clause, both with and without Wi-Fi. As you're going to see in the capital bill when it comes over, there's some money dedicated to DOC for installation of Wi-Fi in correctional facilities. But currently, as you know, it's been a waiting game on that front. So as you can imagine, evaluating these options is going to differ depending on what the technological capacities of the correctional facilities are from day one. So this is saying to cover all ground, what would those startup and transition costs be both with and without Wi-Fi? So those are startup costs. You also need to look at what are the ongoing operational administrative costs? What are the comparisons to the current model? What impacts would there be on department budgets? The piece that I flagged before in subdivision E, anticipated changes in service usage and volume. And F, any anticipated benefits or savings, including reasonably ascertainable impacts on behavior, security, safety, and an incarcerated person's ability to sustain support systems. I did want to pause on this one. The changes, the analysis that you're seeing in subdivisions A through E, you can think of these as more obviously quantitative, right? You're cashing these costs out in dollar figures, impacts on budgets, comparisons to current model. F is meant to embrace both quantitative and qualitative measures. And that's why you see the call out to impacts on behavior, security, safety, and incarcerated person's ability to sustain support systems. I think Representative Casey did a good job of setting up the committee's framing on this. As you could hear from his discussion, the committee kind of has hopes that the benefits that will be shown will relate to reduced recidivism, the ability to sustain family connections, to return more easily to society after being incarcerated, and potentially to having safety benefits within the facility if folks are essentially less agitated by receiving regular phone calls. So that's some of what's captured here. And I did also want to flag this reasonably ascertainable. As you can imagine, it would be quite an ask if you didn't have some kind of mental state modifier here. If you just asked for the department to identify any anticipated benefits or savings, that could be quite massive. And so the reasonably ascertainable is included to make sure that the DOC's task is within a sort of reasonable scope, that they don't need to go aggressively out of their way to identify these pieces. It's just meant to be whatever is reasonably ascertainable, which would be their judgment to determine.
So,
Lastly, yep, go ahead.
You okay with questions?
Yes.
So did they spend a lot of time on that definition? Because that's pretty complicated, the benefits or savings.
Yes, this was actually one that received more back and forth than many others. The first iteration of this clause had spoken to impacts on public safety and behavior, I believe. And part of the committee's thinking was they wanted to be clear that the analysis was not intended to be restricted to what happens just within the walls of the facility. They were trying to get at benefits that might accrue outside and after the duration of someone's time in incarceration. And what I do recall from the discussion there, and it would be helpful to ask the Department of Corrections, is that I recall, I believe it was Haley Summers saying that for A through E, you could expect more direct responses, right? But that the responses to subdivision F would be expected to be a bit more speculative. And I think that the committee was comfortable with that answer. So this was one that was finagled to try to make sure that it could measure both benefits inside and outside correctional facilities and both during and after the term of someone's incarceration.
Okay, and it does not now say public safety, but is public safety intended to be part of safety?
Yes, and yes, it is conceivably captured within these pieces. So impacts on behavior, security, safety, abilities. Yeah.
Okay,
and
thank you.
and of course, part of the concern there was that if you exclusively used public, right, as a modifier for safety, are you suggesting that you don't want updates on the safety within the correctional facility? So safety was thought to be a broader term that could encompass both.
Okay, that's very helpful.
So just to recap the pieces we just went through, that report on telecommunications service models would need to describe the current model, describe alternative options, analyze the cost of each alternative, and then the piece that we hadn't gotten to yet here in sub 4, identify implementation, operational, and transition considerations for each alternative, including the administrative, technological, and contractual requirements, operational changes, implementation timeline, and any required statutory, regulatory, or policy updates. So this is trying to say, you've got an evaluation of the baseline, you've got a description of alternative models, some cost comparisons. Now, if the legislature was interested in implementing any of these particular options, set out in this report some implementation, operationalization concerns that the legislature to take under consideration, including timeline and what kinds of statutory, regulatory, or policy updates would be required, so that beginning next legislative session, the committees of jurisdiction or the legislature as a whole would be in a position to have made bill requests and the like, depending on what the responses are, right? You may get responses that suggest this isn't operational, but this is to make possible legislative changes next session.
Okay.
So that's A, which is the content of the report itself. B is describing a set of stakeholders, and there is a qualifier for this that will make it seem more manageable than it might seem at first ask. So in conducting its evaluation of options for providing no-cost telecommunications services, DOC shall, when practicable, and that's the modifier I was talking about, when practicable, DOC shall consult with the following stakeholders: the Public Utility Commission. They're brought in because of that call out to potentially regulating as a public utility, right? On page 3, the Joint Fiscal Office, one or more nonprofit providers of corrections telecommunication services with operational expertise. And I think that the committee would be able to point you to at least one of these from whom they heard testimony. Core Civic, this is the contractor for the Mississippi piece, which Representative Casey was speaking to. Hear from, and this was added on the floor, this was not something that was contained in the initial report as it came out of the committee. but was added by an amendment from Representatives Chena and Donahue. Incarcerated Vermonters, formerly incarcerated Vermonters, and organizations representing incarcerated or formerly incarcerated individuals. I will note that conceivably these were captured in 6, but this is ensuring that they are a stakeholder if it's practicable to reach out to these folks. Representatives of families of incarcerated Vermonters or organizations representing families of those incarcerated Vermonters, community-based reentry service providers, justice reform organizations, the Prison Research and Innovation Network, FRIEND, and any other stakeholders or subject matter experts identified by the commissioner as necessary for the evaluation. So quite a lengthy list, and you can see kind of the balance that the House was trying to provide, but I did want to just draw your attention to that shall when practicable. So it is not mandatory that it is, quite difficult to reach out to all of these stakeholders, that it be done. And again, that's sort of left to their discretion, what is practicable, right? Subsection, yep, go ahead, sorry.
So, so I was thinking the when practicable would be the items that would be discussed, not the individuals, but if it's the stakeholders themselves.
Exactly.
Okay, interesting.
Exactly.
All right, thank you for pointing that out.
Yep.
I have one question
Oh,
about
okay.
this. So John, it includes the Joint Fiscal Office in that list. Is it usual for the legislature to ask an agency to do something and then consult with the Legislative Fiscal Office?
It is less typical, I would say. Obviously, you can see that Legislative Council is not included here. That's not through me denying that from happening. But it is certainly less, right? You would look at this as typically, I would note that during Representative Casey's framing, he had said study committees, but these aren't study committees in which you would expect regular legislative staffing, right? This is an executive report. This is coming from the department kind of on their terms. As I've talked about a number of times, they have discretion in a number of places as to who to reach out to and the like. So I would say I'm less familiar with a legislative staff office showing up as a piece of a pretty clearly executive report. It's not to say that it couldn't happen, but yes, I kind of agree with where you're coming from.
And do you recall if JFO was consulted on that?
So Scott
By the
Moore,
community?
I believe that Scott Moore was in the room during this, but I do not think that there was an explicit, not while I was in there, I do not recall there being an explicit ask, JFO, can you handle this obligation? I don't recall that.
Great, thanks.
So we can take care of that. We could add
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really interesting too. Did they talk about having a consultant do this?
In place of the department itself?
Yeah, or have the department get a consultant, but I know there's no funding. I don't see any funding. But was there a discussion about that?
I do not recall that, but Haley may know more. I think I was in the room for most of these discussions, and I don't recall that coming up.
Okay, well, we'll ask Haley. She should be here any minute. All right, and the just
Yes.
to be picky, or the number 5, the incarcerated Vermonters, with an and in there, to me, that means that we need to have all 3 categories, which might be challenging. But I don't.
I hear you. I hear you. I mean, you're coming from a good place, which is thinking about how the conjunctions work. And typically my response would be that I agree with you, but because the lead into this remains as practicable, I think
Okay.
it's sort of,
Okay, then I won't worry.
but you're definitely thinking in the right place. Yeah.
Okay. And then, just for the committee, one thing I'm thinking is, Prin might have the capacity to actually do this work. So I'll talk to Haley. We'll talk to Haley about that. I'll ask Haley about that.
Mhm. Mhm.
Which could be helpful. All right, so let's keep going.
Yep. So subsection C, which is the last of this section covering the telecommunications evaluation report, is just ensuring a check-in. So subsection C on line 14, the Department of Corrections shall provide to the Joint Legislative Justice Oversight Committee for the committee's analysis and input a first draft of the report on or before September 15th of this year, and an updated draft of the report on or before November 15th, 2026. The first thing I would do is remind you that the due date is December 1. So that's why you see the November 15th date for the updated draft. Starting with the first draft, I think that this serves two functions. One is to ensure that work has begun before a particular date, right? If you're delivering a first draft report on September 15th, you can't wait until November to start that report. So one is just ensuring that the report is begun and that there's time for joint legislative justice oversight to express any input if it's not headed in the direction that the legislature kind of so intends. And then the updated draft report on November 15th, while you might quibble over the use of the word updated, like you could change one comma and there would technically be an updated draft, right? The thinking here is that you're not requesting the final report because that's due December 1, and that this is within a close enough period to that final report date that this would be a meaningful updated draft that basically gives you a preview of the final draft. There had been some debate about using near final draft, but because it might be responsive to input from the committee, I think they were comfortable with this use of updated. So C is just a check-in to ensure that progress is moving along and that there is some off-session legislative check.
Yeah, and just a comment on that. I think that's a great idea because then it's a wider scope of folks who are involved in this system.
Mhm.
Okay. And
But-
are you guys good so far? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So now section 3.
Perfect. So section 2 was your telecommunications evaluation report. And section 3 is a wage impact evaluation report. This one's a bit more intuitive, but I will walk through. So same due date, on or before December 1, 2026, the Department of Corrections shall provide to the same committees of jurisdiction, House Corrections and Institutions, and the Senate Committee on Institutions, a written report evaluating the impacts of current wages for inmates in the department's custody that 1, collects and analyzes the current wage level for inmates, so knowing what the baseline is. 2, you can think of this too as trying to get at what would the costs of internalizing the share of labor currently borne by inmates be if the state had to internalize those costs. So 2 is saying, identify categories of labor that are performed by inmates that would otherwise be performed by the state and estimate the cost to the state of providing those same services through state employees or contracted vendors, including wage and benefit costs. Basically, this would be a way of showing if the state is and what they are gaining by having labor done in this particular way. And it would show you what the cost would be on kind of the typical market. 3 is comparing different wage impact scenarios and estimating the impact of wage adequacy improvements on outcomes for inmates. I'm going to pause on the wage impact scenarios language. This is things like determining amount of hours corresponding to a particular dollar threshold, right? So you can imagine this translating pretty readily into what it takes to buy a certain number of minutes. If you're trying to purchase minutes for telecommunication services, you could see how different wages would affect the ability to make calls and the like. Estimating the impact of wage adequacy improvements on outcomes for inmates. This harkens back to some of the qualitative evaluation that we talked about with the telecommunications service model evaluation. And so you see that in the call out here, such as maintenance of family contacts, compliance with restitution and support obligations. This was part of the committee's thinking that changing wages for inmates might better support their ability to provide restitution to victims and any kind of family support obligations they have. Improvements on reentry success and participation in facility work programs. Lastly, this report would assess the relationship between current wage levels and the ability of work program participants to purchase telecommunications services and commissary items. This might seem quite simple. The lower the wages, the harder it is, obviously, to buy these particular things. But this would help draw out in some detail so that then when the legislature or the committees of jurisdiction are considering these issues next session or in a subsequent section, they have data they can point to say what those effects would be. So that is the full of the wage impact evaluation report, and this would all be effective on passage.
Okay. Yep.
So, John, with these two reports, I don't expect you'll have an answer now, but if you know of or can find a similar act that been implemented in the past, it's requested some sort of comparable report that we can then look at that and then see what report actually was created.
Sure,
That
sure.
would be helpful for me.
Okay.
Because I know just because last year as both Senator was started, his question with is that we're trying to do less reports. And I just like to
Yes.
see if there's something that we might be able to see, not necessarily from DOC, but any agency, but see something about, what sort of report quality there has been in the past that would be useful.
Yep, I can definitely look for something like that. And it brings to mind, oh gosh, if it will stay in my mind. Oh gosh. It has slipped me. I'm sorry, I am not the sharpest thinking today.
You're today.
Yeah,
Give yourself.
you get it right. Well, I have a question about your question is, when you say similar reports on this topic?
No.
Just in general?
General, something comparable.
So I do recall what I was thinking. I know that the genesis of this request in section 3 for the wage impact evaluation, while I don't think it maps really that closely to the model for it, the direction I was initially given when I drafted section 3 was that last year, I believe in the budget, there had been a request, I think it was in the budget, for DOC to evaluate as part of some larger report impacts on wages. It wasn't drawn out in significant language, and part of the committee's ask to have this included here was animated from this belief that they had not gotten all of the information they wanted from that report under the budget. This is vaguely what I recall happening. I will say that when I built out this section, it wasn't at all modeled on that cited report, because when I looked to whatever that underlying language is, it was pretty thinly related to this topic. But hopefully that helps provide some context that the committee has in the past wanted similar information, and whatever previous request went out, whether through them or someone else, did not result in the information that they had wanted.
Okay.
Hence maybe the specificity that you see here.
So it's the opposite of what you want. It was a report that wasn't sufficient.
Well, no, I'll
I mean, I'm seeing it.
I'll send you an email, John, and I'll share it with the committee if I can figure out my question better than
I think I understand if I can state back, and then you can tell me if I'm thinking correctly. You want to know, for a comparable type report ask of a state agency, what quality report has resulted on a similar time frame, basically. That's the way
Yes.
I hear the question.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, and if you see a bunch of them, get it send them.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I think we're good with the walkthrough. Yes. Anybody have any other questions? I guess, so I'm curious about the floor conversation, but we can, I don't know if you're the person, John, to ask about that.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say about, I'm probably not the best, but I can relay what I do recall of this. It came up on second reading. Representative Chena posed the question to, I believe, Representative Casey, who was a reporter, asking if incarcerated Vermonters were intended to be stakeholders. And Representative Casey said, well, they hadn't explicitly been called out, but could conceivably fit within another bucket. And then he and Representative Donahue requested this amendment just to ensure that those most affected by the policy would be heard. And then perhaps most importantly to your question, I do not recall this being at all controversial on the floor, right? I think this is something that was included with some ease.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're welcome to stick around or do what you need to do. So have a good weekend.
Thank you very much. I'll see you guys next week then, or sometime. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, bye. So Haley, if you would like to come, thank you for being here.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we heard from Representative Casey and John Gray. Have a general idea of what this is about. Do you want to tee it up from the view of the administration?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
For the record, Haley Summer, Director of Communications for DOC. I apologize, I'm a little late, so I may
It's
be
okay.
delving into information that might have already been given to you, so sorry if that happens, but the bill as originally drafted essentially would have mandated DOC to absorb the cost of telecommunications for incarcerated people, pay incarcerated people fair wages, so the state minimum wage, and evaluate its commissary contracts. And in DOC's evaluation of the implications, particularly financially, of the original draft of the bill, it would have resulted in really significant financial deficits. But certainly, you know, respect the theme of the conversation and the ideas that the legislators brought to the table. And so that kind of resulted in reworking the bill to instead create several studies to really delve into what the financial and social implications of both making telecommunications free for incarcerated people and paying them fair wages, and how that would play out before putting it into legislation and passing something that the department might not be able to absorb financially.
We did not know that, so.
Okay, so that was that was the original.
Yeah, we heard that it changed, but.
Yes.
Yeah. but
Yeah.
that's Good to hear.
Yeah, and
Good to
the Corrections and Institutions Committee briefly discussed this bill last year, so and it was 2025 or 2024 when it was first introduced, and then kind of put the conversation on pause, revisited it again this year, and decided that this would be the best path forward to keep the conversation alive without implementing something that would frankly be pretty dire to DOC's budget right now.
And without knowing the implications.
Yeah.
So did DOC do even just a quick analysis of that cost, those costs?
Yes, we did. And I'm happy to share that information.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah,
And we can get it next week if you want, because,
that's okay. I do have it in front of me.
okay.
So for the telecommunications costs, we did, and again, these are kind of like very brief estimates for purposes of testimony on the bill, but we assessed the call volume from November 1st, 2025 to January 31st, 2026. So like roughly a quarter. And then multiplied that by 4 to try and get an idea of what it might be for a year. And so for telecommunications, which is both phone calls, video calls, voice messages, and then kind of like messaging through the tablet, so something akin to an email or a text message, it would have cost the department around $400,000 annually to make all of these services free. That being said, there have been other states that have removed costs for telecommunications for incarcerated people. And because there's no more cost, utilization goes up and they've seen that those costs double. So this is a estimation based on the current services, but it's challenging to say whether this would remain the same number if there were unlimited services that people could access for
If you
free.
want to see how expensive something is, make it free.
Okay.
I guess the thing I'm having a little, and the study is fine, I guess. But, and you, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said to raise, start the wages from what they are now to, what would be the minimum wage in Vermont.
Mhm.
But she hasn't told us that number yet, right?
Yes, so we did an estimate of that as well. And again, it would be challenged. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Before you go on,
Yeah.
the wage piece. The 400K plus this kind of an operational piece. Would there also need to be some capital expenditures? Did you look at that in order to actually implement this if we went in that direction?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I apologize. I should have provided a little bit more context as to how telecommunications currently take place in our correctional facilities. We have a contract with a vendor called IC Solutions. It's actually a $0 contract. And so they have implemented these like tablet, sort of like iPads, that are accessible for incarcerated people at all 6 of our facilities, and the cost for the contract is essentially through the services that the incarcerated people pay for. The tablets themselves are IC Solutions tablets, so they're not state owned. And while, can't exactly say how things would play out if DOC were to absorb costs, whether things would look a little bit different, but it's possible that we would just maintain the same equipment and contract through IC Solutions, but we would be absorbing the cost for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So was the 400,000, was that based on what the incarcerated people are and their families are paying now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just the
So
cost.
the rates would be the same in your estimation?
Yeah, the rates would be the same. The equipment is already provided through our contract. It's really just the cost of service, which again, like this is an estimate on current volume and it is likely to go up if it's free and there's no cap.
Right, and those are at the rates that they're paying now.
Yes.
So that's another variable. I mean, a lot of these, this is good to know,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of moving parts.
For sure, yeah.
So-
And the rates are set right now. They're accessible on our website. I can also read them out to you, but I can also provide them to you in writing so that I'm not just listing a bunch of numbers off. So the rates will likely stay consistent unless something significant changes.
Okay. So then the wages, are we ready to learn about the wages? No.
Yeah, I mean, that's gonna be
Yeah.
a big number,
Yeah.
cause you're going from I'm sorry, was it $1.25 and what's the minimum wage now? 16?
Somewhere in the teens.
Yes.
Well, and the number I always use is $5 a day. I don't know if that's the right
Yeah.
number to use.
So we have work programs in all 6 of our correctional facilities. They provide a variety of jobs. A few examples of this would be like someone working in the kitchen as a chef, someone who might be cleaning the living units, someone who might be doing laundry, someone who might be an open ears coach, which is a peer-to-peer coaching program that we have in our correctional facilities. The range of pay for these jobs is typically from about $1 to, I think the highest paying job might be around $8 or $9, and the pay is daily. It is not hourly. The only facility jobs that pay hourly are the jobs in the Vermont Correctional Industries license plate shop, and that ranges from I think around 25 cents to $1.65, and that's hourly, but the rest are daily. So we did an estimate based off of the amount of individuals who currently have jobs in facilities and how much they're making. And we estimated it would be around $12 million annually in pure wages. This doesn't take into account things like benefits, overtime, workers' comp, things that would need to be taken into account if people were essentially like working full-time in our correctional facilities and making minimum wage in the way that I think this bill contemplates. So again, a rough estimate.
Okay, going back to what we're paying now, the $1 and the $9, are those the bottom and the top of the daily rate?
Yeah, that's typically the range in pay.
Okay,
So like for
so
example,
12 million if they were paid minimum wage.
yeah, for example, breakfast cook right now at Southern State makes $7 a day, but a janitor at Southern State right now makes $1 a day. So you really have like the range in pay depending on the job that they're doing.
And then where do they put the money? I mean, do they have accounts? Do you do this on accounts?
Kind of depends. Some people will put them towards like commissary or telecommunications costs. Some people might save that money. I think the best person to answer this question would be an incarcerated person who has a job in a facility.
Okay,
But
great.
It like
We'll have some
varies per
Actually-
individual.
Well, we'll have them on Zoom.
Yeah, we could definitely like ask a few folks what they tend to do. So
And if we could have somebody on Zoom, that would be really good.
it gets a little tricky with people who are currently incarcerated because of victim impact, but maybe we could contemplate someone who's like been recently released.
Okay, that would be good.
That might be like under supervision, so and might be interested in speaking with the committee.
Okay.
If that's possible.
That would be really great for lots of reasons. Okay, cool. All right. So, oh yes, of course.
Have we looked into what other states are doing on both of these?
Yeah.
We're asking for a study, but I'm sure that some other state has already done this or looked at it and already knows the answer. So I'm just curious, we reached out to other states to see what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a good question. We did a kind of impact analysis of the cost of absorbing telecommunications internally. And I think it was 2023 or 2024. So it was under a different vendor and we also had different call costs. So somewhat outdated at this point, but as part of that analysis, we did do a survey to other states to see which other states had made telecommunications free, whether it was a mandate from the legislature or an initiative of their own, and the impact that they had seen both financially and throughout the facilities. And there are like a few neighboring states who have made calls free. Massachusetts is one of them. There was no cap that they set. And so I know that within the first year of making the calls free, the amount of calls and the cost doubled. So that was a significant financial impact for them. And I know that New York, their state Department of Corrections has also recently made calls free, but I think this was within the last 3 or so months. So the impact is probably not known at this point.
So go ahead.
I could just follow up on that. I mean, I think the cost part is something you can make some reasonable estimates on. It's the non-tangible items that are implied by this, that it's going to improve outcomes, improve behavior, and so forth, that I would think you could get a better feel for by seeing where it's actually been done and have we actually seen benefits.
For sure. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And when we did the survey a few years ago, we did ask that question. It's been a while since I've looked at those results, but some of the impacts were less violence in the institutions, I think in part because people have greater connection with loved ones and also because they might have less idle time because they're spending more time on the phones and connecting with folks. But that was from a few years ago, and I think we'd certainly do something similar to that for this study to ascertain what's changed in those years and how we could try to fit that into Vermont somehow, even though it would really be an estimate. Okay. I don't know if to answer the latter half of your question, I don't know if there are any states that are paying incarcerated people minimum wage. I don't think so. I know there are some states that have Wi-Fi in their correctional facilities, and there are some individuals who actually have remote jobs that they're able to work like in their living units because they have access. And some of those jobs, because they might be like in the private sector, actually pay very highly. Maine is actually a place that does this, and I'm sure they'd be happy to come in here and share about their program. But it is a very interesting model, and I think for some of the individuals who have very high salaries, actually pay some of their salary as like a rent for the Department of Corrections there.
That's interesting.
Interesting.
Did they? Yeah, did they? Because I've heard about that.
Yeah.
Because it's about people having jobs while they're in prison.
Yeah.
Which can be very good for them. Did the House committee talk about that?
Not in depth, I don't think so, but
Because that might be something that we want to.
yeah, and I know of the program, because we have a close relationship with Maine and also from visiting there a few years ago and hearing about some of the men talk about the jobs that they have. There are other states that are doing it. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I don't believe there are any states that are paying people minimum wage through the department.
Okay.
I think there's about 12 million reasons why.
Yeah, but that's a really long, I mean, we should have that conversation multiple times because that's an issue.
That's the stumbling block that I see in the cash straps. That as we are right now, I can't, I can't, I don't need to.
I don't even know why, I don't even know why we're even doing the study.
I
I
don't-
we just vote on this, I'll vote no, and on we go.
Okay, I should let you talk and then,
No, I'm just saying, the wage part of this bill. It is a non-starter for me. I mean, just,
just to understand it. Just
We already know, we don't need
document
to
it.
understand it, we already know it, Chair. We know what it's gonna cost, at least $12 million. And so to go spend $50,000 to do studies that we already know the answers to. Is almost like asking a question on the Senate floor where you're illegal to ask it because you already know the answer.
It depends. This says, there could be stages to this too. It doesn't have to happen all at once, but I think documenting what we do is critical and documenting, what the ideal would be is fine. I think that there's worth to that. But, let me just ask in terms of proceeding with this study. So the Department of Corrections is tasked with this study. Does the department feel that that's not going to be a burden to actually do the study, or did you have? Because I was thinking Print might even be able to do this.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the study as it was drafted by the committee, like contemplates multiple stakeholders being involved in multiple different ways that the department could engage in the study. We had voiced some very significant concerns about the original iteration of the bill. And so if the outcome is that instead we're going to study and better document it, that's something
and
that.
I'm
we should
sorry,
do with.
would just for clarification,
Yeah.
when you say the original iteration of the bill, what was the original?
The first draft of the bill was minus the study. So it was like making telecommunications cost free and
Okay.
paying incarcerated people fair
Went
wages.
to the answer as.
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
You know what, and I apologize, they
No.
did say that,
That's
I
right.
just,
Oh, it's okay.
No, and I can see compared to that, you'd be willing to do a lot of things.
But I mean, because you asked about the burden, it wouldn't cause, significant undue burden on the department, but of course it would take staff time and we'd want to pull in people from different disciplines so that we're able to get accurate and informational responses to the committees of jurisdiction.
Just following up on that, I mean, you've got to produce the first draft report in basically 3 months.
and then you do the study, and then from that glean the conclusion, which is supposed to glean, which is the better outcomes. And I mean, because that's what this is asking, and I'm not sure if you can do that
Okay,
within this, particularly since, to Senator Benson's point, to a certain extent, is that other states, I think they would have done this by now because they're further ahead than we are in some of the things that are being done. And I'm sure they would have asked these questions as well. That's right.
okay, that's good to hear. I don't think we should be. I mean, I have expressed an opinion, but it's my opinion at this point. I think continuing to talk about this bill and keeping an open mind is important. I'd like to hear from the Print folks. They might even be able to do the study. I mean, we realize the amount that the state would need to pay if we were paying wages. The state could also charge folks for things like they are doing now. So that wouldn't necessarily be the net number. And there's plenty of ways to do things. And to your point about determining the value of what we do, that's government. That's the hard part about government, is that government does the things that the private sector doesn't have, doesn't do, mostly because they're public good. And it's hard to measure public good, but somewhere we know that there is a public good, and there are ways to estimate it, but that's a long conversation. So to me, it's our place to have these conversations and get as close as we can to understanding the benefits of what we do. I mean, the corrections system is supposed to keep the public safe and help people who can have good jobs and good lives. And I mean, we need workers, right? We need workforce. So that's a benefit, and it's hard to quantify all of that.
That's fair, Madam Chair, but I'm also going to say it is also government's responsibility to be fiscally responsible.
Of course.
And I'm not sure if this bill is fiscally responsible. That's the thing. And I because even though, the Department of Corrections is going to do the study, as Hallie said, is going to take time from their workforce, and that costs money. And those things cost money. And so if we can have other ways or look towards other states that, like I said before, that are further along than we are in, and have them come in for, as we are going to be doing, have them come in and ask them what their outcomes are. I think that is a better use of what than the study. That's, like I said, that's my opinion.
All right, I understand. We'll take it up. I mean, we'll get testimony. And then just remember that every inmate costs $100,000 a year.
Absolutely. And I'm fully, and we want to make sure that we have, I think, really concrete programs to make sure that they're doing it, like education programs that we're doing that from the college that I'm trying to institute our I don't know if you saw that.
I did.
So those are the things that I'm doing. So
A very good point is $500,000. Is that the best way to spend $500,000 for outcome of people incarcerated? I don't know the answer to that, but I hear that's part of the question you're raising.
Sure. Okay. Well, we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
And so if you have other witnesses, let us know. So what's on my list are the JFO, PRIN. If we could talk to somebody from Massachusetts or Maine, if you have contacts there that you could refer us to, that would be great.
Sure. And I would just note, we would likely consult the PRIN council during the study, but it's not a conversation that they've been brought into yet. So I'm not sure.
Oh, do they know this is happening?
I don't think so.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, it's just being contemplated. So
okay.
we don't.
Well, I would like to talk to them. So do you want to give them a heads up or?
Again, it's challenging to get an incarcerated person.
No. I wanted the PRIN administrator. Abby.
Oh, yeah, if you're seeking input from UVM, I haven't
Yeah.
spoken with Abby.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll just call it UVM then.
Really sorry, there's like multiple stakeholders in Fran, but I can give Abby a heads up,
Yeah,
that'd be helpful.
yeah.
Sure.
Crocker?
Yeah,
Just, Chair, for my information, is PRIN just a state organization or is it a national organization?
It's a local organization
So,
that is, it's the Prison Research Institute.
Innovation Network.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was a national project that started in, I think, 2020 from the Urban Institute, and there were several states that took on this Innovation Network project, but it was funded through a grant that has since ended, and Vermont has continued our partnership with the University of Vermont, kind of born out of it.
so is there a national? Again, I'm just going
Yeah,
to say, if we're trying to find out how this works, if there's some national organization or something that looks at this, they may already have all the answers to these questions.
There might be some, I think corrections institutions took testimony from, I might be forgetting the name, it might be the Prison Policy Institute, but there are certainly organizations that do these types of research and might have some more insight on what it looks like on a national level.
And I'm just not to reinvent the wheel,
no, I totally agree. Or waste our time
right?
either. Yeah,
Or as Senator Major said, being smart about how we spend taxpayers' money.
right. And time is as important. as money. It's ours. So, all right, good. So I think we are good on this unless anybody else.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. I will also plan to send information on our call rates. And if there's any other information pertaining to the topics that the bill contemplates that would be helpful to have, just let me know. I'm happy to either come back or send it to Ken.
Oh, and we do want you to come back. I was just gonna say, please, have some time on your calendar, not just for this, but, we're getting the capital bill and,
Yeah.
and we have 2 weeks to.
Yeah, that's not a me thing, but because I'm not the best person to speak on behalf of that, but we've been talking with BGS and I think I'll chat with Ken about scheduling some testimony for capital bill.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all.
All right. Glad you're not sick.
Yeah, not yet. It really seems to be like going around, you know.
Anybody have anything before we adjourn for the whole weekend?
So you had mentioned yesterday, though, you were going to talk about schedule for reviewing the capital bill.
Yes, are there any topics that, so what I have just planned is, the first deadline that we have is really for the cash, the component for the appropriations, committee. That's what they'll need from us first is the cash component. And so I was working with, Scott Moore about, essentially this column, the cash in the second year, that we would start on that and the yellows of on that column. So that's it's the prison, door controls, DCF, Newport, Wi-Fi, women's facility. It's also the veterans home and Newport courthouse, or 4 things. And there's 4 items, and then just generally BGS. They're critical. So BGS, corrections, the veterans home, and the Newport courthouse isn't going to be a huge conversation, but it's in that category.
Where are you looking at that?
Well, I don't know if they officially announced, but it's a worst kept secret probably in state government, but I think they're probably gonna be I think. There's a hole in town, and I think that they're planning on buying part of that hole, or some of that hole, or all of that hole, and constructing a courthouse, but I don't know that.
That seems very practical to me. I hope it does to you, since that's your town.
I think that, I will refrain.
Okay. That's what I thought. From afar, it looks very practical. And that hole obviously needs to be used. So are there any other, I mean, obviously, we're going to go through everything, but I just wanted to prioritize the things that we needed to focus on first. And you don't have to tell me now, but if you do know now, let me know.
Sounds like the sooner we get started at this, the better.
Oh, yeah, and we're going to be starting likely before we have possession of the bill, but that's fine. And we, honestly, we've already started. You know, we've heard testimony from folks already. Okay, so everybody good? All right, we are adjourned.